hold on tight. Today we're going to see 35 amazing moments in aviation that we were lucky enough to catch on camera. We've put together a selection full of thrills. So our Nick and from unfortunate pilot misses to gravity-defying stunts and catastrophic events. You're on the Eternity Lab channel, a lab of ever-relevant content. Let's start watching these incredible stories. Sometimes flights bring cute and funny surprises. It was a proud moment for this young man. He was going to show his mother the breathtaking views through the clouds. As the plane took off and Mom was enjoying the flight, something appeared in the frame crawling along the wing towards the cockpit. Oh my, what an unexpected guest! The cat was a stowaway on this flight and must have been going crazy with fear. When the pilot spotted her, his reaction made it clear that a cat was the last thing he expected to see in the air. Although her instincts told her to do the right thing, the animal still had enough strength to stay on board. The pilot had to land to let off an extra passenger, and the cat, I'm sure, spent one of her 9 cat lives on this flight. And something can go wrong at an air show. Right before our eyes, the pilot tries to perform a trick, but it goes horribly wrong. The plane's engines appear to have stalled, and in fact, the fuel pump is malfunctioning. The American CF-18 fighter jet can no longer throttle up, and with no choice, the pilot must push the eject button. We see him being thrown out of the plane just moments before it crashes. Amidst the mad explosion, as a huge black cloud covers the sky, we are comforted by the thought that the pilot survived. Despite the fact that this is a very expensive machine, abandoning it in favor of saving your life is a decision that must be made in seconds and on time. Believe it or not, this incident actually made headlines around the world. A Seattle airport employee hijacked a plane and took it on a wild ride that eventually crashed, but not before terrorizing the skies for 20 terrifying minutes. There were no passengers on board, thank goodness, but the plane was doing crazy somersaults, darting around the sky like a mad bird. The pilot ended up screaming to the controllers that he had no idea how to land the plane. He made some impressive loops, and when everyone began to get out of control, and eventually fighter jets had to be called in. The ATR-72 is a propeller-driven aircraft, a popular model for short-haul flights. On February 24, 2015, a domestic Trans-Asia flight took off from Songshan Airport on Taiwan's Kinmen Island to go down in history as one of aviation's most famous incidents. Everything was going according to plan until 3 minutes after takeoff, when things went into an emergency mode. For some unknown reason, the plane began to lose altitude and crashed into a river 5 kilometers from Taipei Airport. The pilots narrowly avoided colliding with nearby buildings. In this horrific footage, we see the plane literally clip a car on a bridge before crashing into the water. While this animation allows for a detailed recreation of the incident, we do have the real footage. The best part is that all the passengers got out with minor injuries. Looking at the crash, it's hard to believe that anyone on board was unharmed. In any case, an investigation was conducted. It was established that the plane's crash was caused by the right engine, which failed. Bhutan's airport is perhaps the most dangerous in the world. Even though it is not subject to strong winds, but its location between 2 mountains makes the approach a challenge for not every pilot. Sit back and enjoy the footage as these 2 pilots expertly guide their A319 to a perfect landing between the mountains. The tricky part is that the final turn of the approach pattern to the runway is very dangerous, and if the pilot fails to get it right, they have to go around and try again. But these pilots clearly know this airport and their business. Remember the feeling from childhood when you were riding in a car and have you seen a plane in the sky that seemed to be hovering there and not moving? This is exactly what happened to the small plane that couldn't withstand a dangerous gust of storm wind. Suddenly, it stopped in midair for a couple of seconds before touching the runway, even if sideways, but for sure. It's a shame we don't have any video from the cockpit because the pilot made this landing a circus stunt given the strong headwind. An emergency landing is not a lottery. The pilot's skill and circumstances are important, but also, of course, luck. The Boeing 787 is approaching and is already touching the ground, but something makes it jump in the air. The pilot decides to abort the landing and go around. This situation is called an aborted landing approach or touch and go. Although this situation is not standard, it is not catastrophic. Pilots practice it during training. I can't say the same about the passengers. They must have been scared. Although this may seem like an unsuccessful landing, the pilot deserves all the praise for the smart decision he made. Plus, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner is, of course, an engineering marvel, but this is a wide-body aircraft which is not suitable for jumping on the runway. This pilot was lucky to stay alive. At first, we don't even suspect that a car DVR can have anything to do with aviation. But when we see how the plane falls, catching power lines along the way, and catching fire, it is hard to believe that it is real. It's amazing that no one was hurt. The impact seems crazy, since the plane was engulfed in flames. If you look closely, you'll see that there was a gas station nearby. I can't even imagine what would have happened if the fall had been a few meters lower. When you don't take off properly, something untoward can happen. At first, it seems like everything is fine, but the plane is actually losing speed. Because the pilot was trying to climb with less thrust, the wings weren't creating enough lift. He soon began to realize that there was no way to stay clear of that tree line. It's not the best feeling when you're inside an out-of-control plane, and since there's nothing you can do, the pilot had to eject. And the plane went into an inevitable stall and crashed into the trees. The Beechcraft 18 is an American light passenger aircraft that has become a legendary model due to its famous low passes at air shows. Many spectators loved watching these crazy machines fly right overhead, and the best part of these moments is hearing the roar of its powerful engine. We are now watching a Beechcraft perform a breathtaking low pass just a few meters above the ground. It flies right over the delighted spectators. Everyone on this beach was busy filming the flying tents, but people didn't immediately realize what had caused the vortex. Seconds before everything on the beach took off, right above them at terrifying speeds, a fighter flew by. They just didn't have time to see it, they only felt the consequences, although they should have heard the sound. Helicopters are very convenient machines, only if there is enough space for them in the sky and on the ground. A very strange helicopter crash happened in the city. The pilot was setting up a Christmas tree, but suddenly the rotor blades got tangled in a bunch of cables, and the helicopter instantly broke in half. He immediately hit the ground, and as soon as the blades finally stopped, all the workers rushed to save the pilot. Luckily, no one was hurt, but the situation itself is quite ridiculous and dangerous. Why use a helicopter at all when there is so much interference around? The helicopter is getting ready to take off, and while the pilots are going through the final checklist, everything seems fine. until the moment when the helicopter suddenly tilts to the right and starts drawing circles on the asphalt. If you have a basic understanding of how helicopters work, you know that there is no way to stop this mess, and the end is certain. The blades have torn off, leaving the body completely helpless. It's a miracle that the workers nearby barely managed to get out in one piece, because chaotically flying debris is deadly. It's lucky that no one was hurt. A near-death experience, it was clear from the start something was going to happen. The second helicopter kept flying towards the other one. The distance was already critical. I assume he miscalculated the distance visually. If you look closely, you'll see a man sticking out of the second helicopter, and as soon as the crash happens, he hides. It's a miracle he survived. And as for the pilot, I'm sure he's in for a nasty meeting with the management. Another episode that shows us the power of a downdraft. Look at how this plane is barely staying in the air just because a helicopter flew in front of it. Okay, it wasn't an ordinary helicopter, but one of the most powerful, a UH-60 Blackhawk. But still, the pilot had a hard time keeping the plane in check, and while he certainly deserves credit for his skill, it would have been wiser to keep his distance. Tricks nor jokes are available. However, not all people understand the seriousness of aviation technology and everything related to safety. These tourists on the beach witnessed an interesting scene. A plane on the runway was very close to them and was preparing to take off. They came close and waited for it to start moving. They had already prepared their cameras to film it. However, they did not take into account an important thing. As soon as the plane started its engines, they would have to fight for their lives. The pilots increased the throttle, and almost everyone standing in the back could be carried away into the ocean along with their cameras, phones, and iPads. The thing is, the power of a jet engine is not a fan. It will simply blow away everything that is behind it and suck in everything that is dangerously standing in front. Apparently, we are all used to being passengers and do not know what happens outside when an airplane takes off. Believe me, this airport has already had unpleasant incidents with such observers. This is too close for comfort. We've all seen fighter jets in close formation, but I've never seen commercial jets do this. It's worrying. Two commercial jets flying too close to be safe. Yes, this is part of an air show, but in any case, what experience and confidence the pilots need to fly like this? The ability to remain calm when there is a huge plane in front of you and both planes are flying at high speed? It's impressive. This tragic accident occurred at the Moscow airport on the runway. We see footage of an intense fire as passengers leave the plane via inflatable emergency slides and for some reason do not move away from the dangerous area. Perhaps they do not realize that the plane could explode at any second. The commercial flight took off in perfect condition, but after a lightning strike and partial electronic failure, they had to return with full tanks. During the hard landing, the landing gear broke and damaged the fuel tank, which caused a massive fire in the rear of the plane. It was a tragic moment in the world of civil aviation, as it cost the lives of many passengers. We are witnessing a historical event. The Concorde supersonic civilian aircraft takes off from New York's John F. Kennedy Airport. It was the fastest commercial aircraft, reaching a cruising speed of over 2,100 kilometers per hour. And despite its obvious futuristic design, the fate of this model did not work out due to a tragic incident. Look how incredibly beautiful it looks as it pierces the sky, taking off for the last time. Those who love aviation know that Concorde is not just an airplane, but a page of history. In terms of technology and innovation, it still has no equal. I wouldn't want to be inside this plane. The pilot is forced to make an emergency belly landing after the landing gear exploded. This video was filmed by a passenger in the back, and he captured the moment the plane made contact with the runway. There's a loud clunk, and for a few seconds, sparks fly off the underside of the plane and the whole plane rumbles. The fact that this guy is still recording the video is insane. Still, the pilot showed impeccable skill. The plane avoids a tail strike during the hard landing, but it already looks like a scene from an action movie. We can appreciate the effect in slow motion to see how close the plane was to losing a wing. The pilot is probably struggling with a strong crosswind, which is why he is having such difficulty balancing. Trying to avoid the left wing hitting the runway, he is desperately braking. It must be said that a melted tire is better than a broken wing. Literally inches above the runway, he wins this fight in favor of the wings. Did you notice anything strange about this plane? I want you to take a closer look. Is there anything unusual? If you said it had a landing gear problem, you were right. The controls failed and the front wheels did not turn. They were sideways. So the pilot essentially landed the plane without wheels on an iron strut. He circled for a long time to use up fuel, and now landing this machine is the only option. As soon as the plane hit the runway, the landing gear caught fire, and due to friction, half of the wheel literally melted off. But the pilot probably got a standing ovation, because this emergency landing was much smoother than in the previous clips. The plane had to fight a sandstorm. We see it heading straight into the storm front, and I wouldn't want to fly on this flight either. At only 1,000 meters, it will have to overcome a lot of troubles. I'll tell you about the consequences right away, so you don't get scared. Everyone on board survived, but judging by their stories, it was a near-fatal experience. The propeller plane was shaking violently, and after landing, it was carefully examined. Micro tears were found throughout its body. Even the propeller could have fallen off. A jet plane, getting into a sandstorm, faces the same problems as during a volcanic eruption. Small particles can cause engine failure, so flights of airliners in such conditions are not recommended. Another example of an aborted landing. This time, the Boeing 767 was perfectly lined up for a smooth landing, and the pilot expected an easy end to the flight. But as soon as the wheels touched the runway, the plane started bouncing. The pilots did not immediately abandon the landing, thinking that they could still land. But if the plane is bouncing on the ground, there is a great danger of hitting the tail or wing. Luckily, they were able to immediately take off and land successfully on the next approach, but it was an intense bounce. Another landing with a strong crosswind. Looks like the pilots of this A380 knew how to make emergency landings in strong crosswinds. They calculated the trajectory in advance. The Airbus touches the runway almost sideways. It is possible that passengers are in the middle of the plane. They saw that the plane had landed across the runway. However, the pilot leveled the plane in a matter of seconds and made a safe landing. If you are an aviation fan, this clip might lift your spirits. The A380 is struggling with a strong crosswind as it lands, and you can even see that it is approaching the runway at an angle to land straight. As soon as the rear wheels touch the tarmac, it bounces back and veers in the opposite direction. But the pilot somehow managed to avoid going off the runway and level the plane. This is the best scene of an atypical landing I have ever seen, and I am inclined to attribute it to the skill of the pilots. It would seem that light aviation is more mobile, but such aircraft also have problems more often. Incredible footage, emergency landing on the highway. Look how a skilled pilot literally squeezes a small plane onto a 3-lane highway. Amazingly, no one was hurt. Even taking into account the fact that the plane still crashed into an SUV. Although the driver apparently did not even realize what happened. Everything is fine. Everyone is alive. Take a closer look because the pilot could not have done his job better. He avoided the impact, successfully passing all the poles and wires. These guys made an impression. Already in the air, the engine of their private jet failed. Instead of panicking, they calmly surveyed the area and decided to land the plane in a cornfield like a glider. They were lucky to find a corridor without trees, and the pilot on the left manually made a safe landing. Both guys came out on the field without scratches. It seems that even the plane survived the crash with minimal damage. Calmness and calculation are the main helpers in emergency situations. I have no idea what the pilot of this plane was thinking. He seems to be landing, but the Cessna suddenly loses control. Then he decides to take off again and try again. It's strange. What was he hoping for? If something went wrong on the ground, then why should it be right in the air? The last thing we see is the pilot yanking the control column and the plane somersaults. I assume he crashed into the hangar while trying to take off again, and now his Cessna looks like a pile of scrap metal. I have one question left. Who was filming the pilot's actions? I hope he is okay. Another Cessna crash, but this time it was caused by turbulence. Yes, it's a real thing. A passing plane or helicopter creates a vortex that can last up to 2 minutes. The term wake turbulence is used to describe the lift an aircraft leaves behind as it flies through the air. Unfortunately for this pilot, he was caught right in the middle of that wake turbulence, causing his lightweight Cessna to completely lose control and crash into the ground. Even if a regular helicopter is capable of causing such a disturbance in the air, imagine the force of the trail left by, for example, an A380. That's why airports have strict minimum intervals between takeoffs. I advise you to skip this clip if you are afraid of disasters, but unfortunately, this is a real incident caught on camera. A tragic event occurred at the Reno Air Races in Nevada. A veteran aviator crashed his World War II Mustang P-51 during the National Air Races. Pilot Jimmy Leeward, 74, was an experienced aerobatic pilot who had appeared in films as a stunt pilot and was trying to fly the plane away from the spectators until the very end. Unfortunately, he crashed nose first into the crowd while performing a stunt at nearly 450 miles per hour. While there is always a risk of accidents at these air shows, I don't think there has ever been a more traumatic incident. When the pilot exits the loop, everyone realizes that he is too low to be safe. It was also said that the cause of the disaster was not a miscalculation, but the loss of an important part, the stabilizer. But one way or another, the plane disappeared in a cloud of dust in a second, sowing panic in the crowd and causing many injuries. But there are still some desperate madmen who want to conquer all fear in the world. Red Bull is known to inspire, so even the most ridiculous ideas seem feasible to some. This crazy stunt was organized by Red Bull. A tunnel race in a plane is absurd, but there was a pilot who wanted and was able to make it happen. This racing plane can reach speeds of up to 250 kilometers per hour. Here, he presses the gas and goes through tunnel number 1. When he has to enter the second tunnel, the speed is already crazy. One wrong move and everything can turn into horror. But the pilot seems to know exactly what he's doing. He keeps his cool and manages to jump out of the second tunnel to a victorious climb. I hope no one has tried to repeat this. I think we can all agree that this video shows a landing was really tough, but you'd be surprised to learn that the plane was in danger of breaking in half. The pilot actually almost smashed it. When a plane bounces off the ground, it bends during a hard landing. Essentially, it's a flexible but metal tube. Try to imagine what would happen if you flexed it back and forth. A gap would appear in the hull. We can just admire it. It's clear now that the pilot almost broke the plane in half, and now the airliner is unfit for flight. You and I see both planes in the frame and wonder, is it really not as obvious for the pilot who is taxiing to the runway? It seems that even when driving a car, the most logical thing to do when driving out of the yard onto the street is to simply look around instinctively. We do not know the reason for the situation. Either they did not coordinate with the control tower, or this pilot violated protocols and drove out without noticing that a huge airliner was rushing towards him. One way or another, the matter is decided by seconds or fractions of them. Fortunately, the pilot of the second plane noticed the obstacle in time and aborted the landing at the stage when it was still possible. By pressing the gas and lifting the plane back into the air, he saved the world from one of the most horrific disasters in the history of aviation. Enough of the disasters and terrible misses for today. Let's look at a beautiful phenomenon that always amazes. When an airplane flies through clouds, it creates impressive vortices, a majestic sight to behold. Don't those clouds look like angels' wings? And if you look closely, you can even see how this Airbus creates its own clouds with its powerful lift on top of the wings. Now you know what a turbulent wake looks like. That's all for today, but we want to ask, which moment from these aviation accidents left you gasping in amazement? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.